New Orleans Saints pass rusher Carl Granderson could take a major step forward in the team's new defensive scheme, but for some reason, he's often forgotten about. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, don't rule out tight end Foster Moreau, especially when he gets back from injury. Cornerback Isaac Yadam could have a major impact on the cornerback room's impact in 2025. And we're going to lead everything off with Carl Granderson, the New Orleans Saints defensive end, who has every opportunity to take a major step forward in Brandon Staley's new defense, but for some reason is often left out of the conversation. We got all that coming up for you on today's show. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. The New Orleans Saints' new defense, brought to you by new defensive coordinator Brandon Staley, is going to have a major impact on what it is that the New Orleans Saints do from a pass rush perspective. And one of the players set to benefit from that more than anyone else, or just as much as anyone else, is defensive end Carl Granderson. Carl Granderson oftentimes gets kind of skipped over in conversations when it comes to the benefit of Brandon Staley, because many people think of Carl Granderson as being this, bigger defensive end that clocks in at 6'5", 200, I think he was playing close to 270, 280 pounds last year. But that's not who Carl Granderson originally was, nor is it who he is at this point. As I look at the last roster that the New Orleans Saints gave us during mandatory minicamps, Carl Granderson is listed right now on the roster at 6'5", 261 pounds. That's down from last year. I'll have to dig around and see if I can find an old roster at some point, and I'll tell you what he was clocked at last year. But this is a guy that has slimmed back down and that is playing a little bit closer to the weight that he was at when he was drafted. Now, he was a little bit lighter when he was drafted, don't get me wrong, but Carl Granderson did not come into the NFL as a big-bodied, speed to power conversion pass rusher. No, he came into the league at 6'4", 254 pounds, out of Wyoming, as an undrafted free agent, a hyper-athletic player that could win with bend around the edge and that could run the arc. That was his bread and butter. He was an athletic pass rusher. He was not a speed to power conversion bull rush kind of guy, but that's kind of what he transitioned into as he outlasted guys that were drafted around him. Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner, right? These guys that were drafted around him, they're no longer on the team. Carl Granderson has gone through, 3 contracts now at this point, or is in his 3rd contract now at this point. And he stands to benefit just as much as a Chase Young, who clocks in at 6'5", 265 pounds on this year's roster, as a player that comes in and could benefit from Brandon Staley's new defensive system, the one that allows them to be able to stand up, rush, win with athleticism, that 2-point stance, not have to burst from the 3-point stance with the hand in the dirt. And if you look at what Carl Granderson did last year, he was top 20 in the NFL when it came to pressures over on defense with 58, also had 55.5 sacks. Now, we know that one of the big things that you want to see this team get better with, and the same thing goes for Chase Young, who had 73 pressures last year and 5.5 sacks, is converting those pressures to sacks, right? And so both Brian Brzee, I keep wanting to do that, both Chase Young and Carl Granderson finished top 17, with Carl Granderson finishing 17th and Chase Young finishing 6th when it came to quarterback pressures. The issue was the conversion from pressures to sacks. And so for Carl Granderson, this new defense that has allowed him to be able to get back to maybe a more comfortable playing weight, has allowed him to be able to get back to a role that is maybe a little bit more suited for him, should allow him to be able to benefit just as much as a Chase Young in this new defensive system. But I understand why we talk about it differently, right? Chase Young and Carl Granderson come from two very different pass rushers in terms of their NFL trajectory. Chase Young finished up and went to college at Ohio State. Carl Granderson, Wyoming, right? Mountain West Conference versus Big Ten Conference, Group of Five Conference versus what used to be a Power Five Conference, now Power Four Conference. Chase Young, number 2 overall selection. Carl Granderson, undrafted free agent the year before Chase Young came out, right? You got Carl Granderson, 7 years of NFL experience, Chase Young, 6 years. And so both of these players came into the NFL and now have ended up in the exact same place, opposite one another, in the exact same defense, experiencing the exact same changes and experiencing the exact same benefits as one another. But we're going to hear a lot more about Chase Young because Chase Young now has the ability to be able to go out here and potentially live up to that draft status that everyone has been waiting to see him consistently perform at. I think we've seen flashes of his draft status. There's no doubt about that. I'm not going to insult Chase Young's, level of play. We've seen it. But people are looking for it more consistently. Maybe this defense will give him the opportunity to do it. But a guy going through the exact same transition and going into the exact same opportunity is right there opposite him, even though he came into the NFL in an entirely different way. It's Carl Granderson, who, again, slimming down, looks slimmer when he's on the field as well from what we saw during OTAs and minicamp. We'll see what his playing weight and playing size looks like when he gets to training camp. I'm sure that might be a little bit different. Sometimes these guys spend off seasons at one weight and they get ready for the season and play the season at a different weight. So we'll see what actually ends up happening when it comes to that. But both of these guys now have this sort of great opportunity ahead of them to be able to take this step forward. It's just that no one's talking about Carl Granderson because Chase Young is now opposite him. And to an extent, Chase Young being opposite Carl Granderson might open up more opportunities for Carl Granderson because everyone's going to be worried about Chase Young, right? Where are they going to dedicate that extra, chip from the running back or that extra blocker in the backfield, or that extra blocker at tight end, or that extra, chip and release from that tight end? They're going to dedicate that to Carl Granderson's side. If not, they might dedicate it over to Chase Young's side. That gives Carl Granderson a one-on-one on the outside because you have 2 outside rushers and you've got 3 interior pass rushers. So now you've got one-on-ones at tackle, 2 guards, center, 5-on-5. That's assuming that you rush all 5 of those players. And so Granderson ends up in a really good situation. And none of the investments over the New Orleans Saints 2025 offseason are impacting Granderson's trajectory outlook whatsoever. Chase Young gets re-signed. They were together last year and again, performed well opposite one another, both top 20 in pressures in 2025 or 2024. Cam Jordan's back for his 15th year. No impact on Carl Granderson. He has been coexisting with Cam Jordan every year of his career. Peyton Turner's gone. Tano Passanio's gone. Isaiah Foskey's still around. Fadil Diggs came in the 7th round. Jasheem Davis added in the offseason as an undrafted free agent. Chris Rumph brought in, has familiarity with Brandon Staley, but comes in as a late free agent addition. No guarantees there for anybody in that situation. And so Carl Granderson absolutely might not be being talked about very much, but is ready to be a part of the conversation during the 2025 season. And I think all of these changes are going to benefit him just as much as they have benefited or are expected to benefit Chase Young. Coming up next, another player that benefits from the change in system is somebody that's actually already excelled in the previous one. That's cornerback Isaac Yadam, but no one's really talking about him either. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the absolute best place to go to get tickets to your favorite sporting events or really a bunch of other live events that they have as well. Here's my favorite way to use Game Time. You open up the app and then you can sort everything by city. I travel a lot. Maybe you do too. It's a great way to spontaneously find something to go and do when you're out of town and you're not really sure where to go, things like that. Great stuff available for you over on Game Time. And of course, with the NFL season right around the corner, you're going to be able to find great seats to your favorite football team, including the New Orleans Saints, for as low as $100 thanks to some exclusive discounts. And of course, with the Game Time guarantee, you know that your tickets are 100% authentic, that they'll always arrive on time, and that you'll get the best price with fees included. So go and check them out today. You can take all the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. Another player that I think is flying under the radar so far, and maybe I'm just a little bit higher on than most, is veteran cornerback Isaac Yadam. Very similar, actually, to Carl Granderson in that this new scheme plays to his strengths, but he's got an excellent player at the same position opposite him who's also set to benefit uniquely from the change of scenery, from the change of scheme, rather. And that overshadows a little bit of what it is that this player can do. Isaac Yadam returns to the New Orleans Saints after having a stellar 2023 season with them, spent 2024 with the San Francisco 49ers, and then now finds his way back to New Orleans, now in Brandon Staley's scheme. And remember that last year, during that 2024 season, where he signed with the San Francisco 49ers to be a starter and it never really was given much of an opportunity out there, that he overlapped with Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley was the assistant head coach during that time and during that season. And during that time, he worked very closely with the San Francisco 49ers secondary. So he worked with Isaac Yadam quite a bit. So the two are very familiar with one another. And so while you have a guy on the opposite side at cornerback like Kool-Aid McKinstry, who has had this incredible OTA mini camp period of the offseason, all those other things, and there's been a lot of discussion around Kool-Aid McKinstry, and deservedly so. He's warranted all of the attention. He's been awesome all throughout the offseason programs. We broke him down a couple times here on this show. Isaac Yadam has been over on the opposite side performing just as well, or maybe not just as well, but performing well, and comes back to New Orleans after performing like gangbusters out in 2023. He was excellent for the New Orleans Saints in 2023, filling in during injuries to Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo. Now, both of those players are on their way out, or not on their way out, but have left New Orleans. And for New Orleans, it's kind of like, well, you know, they kind of got used to being without those guys anyway because of the injuries and stuff like that, but you still are going to miss that talent. You had a lockdown number one guy when healthy and on the field in Marshawn Lattimore. You had a phenomenal high-level ball production player in Paulson Adebo opposite him. Yes, he got a lot of flags, but you took that with what it was that you got from him as a production player, especially with how disruptive he was at the catch point, all these other things. Those are some big losses. But Isaac Yadam, 30% forced incompletion percentage back in 2023. That was the best and highest mark per Pro Football Focus in the entire NFL at the position in 2023 amongst all corners that played at least 300 coverage snaps. I mean, he was outstanding throughout that season. You remember that Green Bay game where he broke up, I believe it was like 2 or 3 passes in the end zone, or at least a deep pass and another pass in the end zone. Just has sort of the veteran savvy, I can rely on my fundamentals type of game, while being able to mirror wide receivers really well, mirror routes, run routes for those wide receivers. He's been in the NFL for a while. Right now, he's clocked with 8 years of game experience, of NFL experience coming out of Boston College at 6'1", 200 plus pounds, or 198 pounds. And he comes in as a guy that has seen a lot and that has the physical build, that has the physicality, that has the speed, that has the smarts, that has the experience. He's got all of it. And now he steps into this system with Brandon Staley, which is very familiar to the system that he, or was very familiar to some of the things that he has done in the past. He's overlapped with Brandon Staley in other places too. I believe it was Denver was one of the other places where he has some familiarity, at least with the coaching staff and everything. And so you have this guy that has come across, or these two guys that have come across one another on a couple different occasions that now reunite. And not a lot of what Isaac Yadam is going to be asked to do is going to feel foreign, unfamiliar, or uncomfortable to him because he's very used to it. When we spoke to him after he signed and they gave it, they made Yadam available to New Orleans media and Saints media on Zoom a couple of days after he signed his contract to return to New Orleans. One of the things that he talked about was how comfortable he was going to be in Brandon Staley's defense and how Brandon Staley's defense gives that secondary the opportunity to attack, right? He was one of the first people that really talked about keeping eyes on quarterback, and having the opportunity then to be able to go out there and make plays. He likes being aggressive. He likes being able to play to that level or play to that style of game. And it fits very well what it is that he does well as a disruptive player at the catch point. You see what I'm getting at here? So now you give him kind of a lead opportunity to get to the catch point, and he has an ability to be a bit more disruptive in this more zone heavy, zone match, pattern matching offense than that turn your back to the quarterback, press man, you got to be bigger than the other guy type of defense that Dennis Allen was calling. And look, Isaac Yadam did that well, but he can also do this well. And so if the Saints don't go out there and get a Jair Alexander, or they don't go out there and sign an Asante Samuel Jr. to start opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside, and they go with Isaac Yadam, I don't think that's a bad call. I think that there's going to be a little bit of like confidence question marks when it comes to the fan base maybe and stuff like that. I get that because he's not a big name. He's been in the NFL for a little while, all these other things. But if they're able to get, 80% of what they got out of him from 2023, that's a solid second cornerback for you opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's going to be expected to be kind of like the top number one lockdown guy. Then you add Alontae Taylor on the inside, and then you're probably allowing Alontae Taylor to play on the outside during base snaps when you've only got two cornerbacks and two safeties on the field. And then Yadam comes in when they go to these nickel sets, then Alontae Taylor moves to the inside. So you're managing sort of these reps, these snaps, all these other pieces, and you're allowing one of your best players, Alontae Taylor, to move around, which is going to allow him to be able to cover some of the better wide receivers in the NFL as well. Terry Joseph, the defensive pass game coordinator, spoke to me about how NFL players, or NFL teams rather, are now putting their best players in the slot a ton when it comes to the wide receiver position. And so that's why they like a guy like Alontae Taylor that can go in and hang with those players. And so now you put Isaac Yadam on the second or third best guy when they line up on the outside, and you got a pretty good matchup there. And so I like what it is that New Orleans could potentially get from Isaac Yadam. Now, Yadam's going to have some competition as well. People may not see it that way, but he will. Rico Payton was outstanding during his time throughout the preseason last year. And he is somebody that started off kind of struggling in training camp early on last season, and then just got better and better and better and kept working and working and working and grinding and grinding and grinding. And Rico Payton's going to get more opportunities to go out there and compete. I think Rico Payton's pretty close to a lock on the roster as well because of what you get from him as a special teams player, somebody that can be that other gunner opposite JT Gray. And by the way, Isaac Yadam also contributes on special teams. One of the initial reasons why he was signed was because of his special teams value. And then he ended up showing that he could be an excellent corner for New Orleans as well. And so now I think you put him in a more comfortable situation where he can keep his eyes on the ball, keep his eyes on the quarterback a little bit more, get a feel of what's going on around him, get other players around him in their best possible positions, like Alontae Taylor, for instance. And it's hard to see how the veteran doesn't end up benefiting from this new system. And so while some may still feel that the New Orleans Saints need to go out there and get a new starting cornerback, and hey, the Saints might feel that way themselves, I'm also here to say, I don't think that Isaac Yadam's a bad option for you on the outside at all. So we'll see how things work out. But I do think that he is going to help to bolster the impact of that New Orleans Saints cornerback room. Coming up next, do not be afraid to bet on former LSU Tiger and New Orleans Saints tight end Foster Moreau. We got that coming up for you next. We continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Would you believe me if I told you that the thing that has held Foster Moreau back the most since arriving here in New Orleans is his target share? Because it absolutely is, and you should not be afraid to bet on him if he gets the opportunities that he deserves going into this 2025 season. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us. Make sure for your second listen today, you go and check out Locked On NFL Scouting. Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino, giving you everything you need to know from a team-building perspective around the NFL, going roster by roster and breaking things down. Make sure you go and check them out. Easy way to become the smartest fan that you can be is with the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. Foster Moreau last year had 32 receptions, 413 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. So he had 5 touchdown catches amongst the season. Those were all pretty solid numbers for him. His best as a New Orleans Saint, his second highest yards total in his career, 413, just 7 yards behind his career high back in 2022 with the Las Vegas Raiders, had 420 receiving yards. But would you believe me if I told you that his last 2 seasons in New Orleans have been amongst his least targeted seasons of his career? And you might think, well, yeah, he did manage some injuries and things like that. But remember, still appeared in 15 games in 2023, still appeared in 17 games in 2024. So he was on the field, ready, available, all those other pieces. 2023 kind of got a little messed up because he shows up in New Orleans. He gets through the Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis. What an incredible story that was. Gets out on the football field. He's out there for camp and all that kind of stuff. And then the offensive line gets obliterated. And then all of a sudden he's out there helping to, block a bunch. And then in 2024, he gets out there. He's there for the entire season, everything like that. He's feeling better than he had. He played 2023 with that 3D printed brace that the Saints training staff made for him because he had this tendon in his foot that kept slipping and all these other things. So they did that to literally hold it in place. And then he was finally able to get that taken care of. So 2024, he goes in, he's healthy, plays 17 games. Unfortunately, during that 17th game, ends up with a pretty big injury that caused him to even get dragged off the field at one point to clear him from the field of play. It was a scary moment. And now he's, had surgery and recovered and all those other things. And he's been standing on the sideline, working with the other tight ends, working with the other players and stuff like that, but not participating. But we expect that he'll participate at some point during training camp. That's been the story of Foster Moreau so far. But those injuries didn't impact a ton of his availability. They came later in the season, or he played through them, like in the situation of 2023. Then you add into 2024 that you had 3 different quarterbacks that started games. You had, issues in the offensive line again, although the tackle spots were solid and all that. And so there was one season where he became an extra blocker for the most part, and then kind of caught on towards the end of the season when they were like, oh yeah, this guy's really good. And then in 2024, other things impacted his ability to be able to make an impact. And then it, ended up with that injury. But he had nearly his best season as a pro. He had his second highest receiving, receptions number, second highest receiving yards, as we discussed, tied for the most receiving touchdowns that he's had in his career, contributed the second most first downs of his career, all these other pieces, had one of his better success percentages, had one of his better catch percentages as well at 74.4%. So you could see that it was still a solid year for him, but I don't think that the Saints got everything that they could have gotten out of Foster Moreau. And a big part of it was the changing of quarterbacks and who was comfortable with whom, and kind of the evaluation season toward the end of the year, all those other things. There was also a couple of big plays that got called back due to injury and stuff like that. It always seemed to be Foster Moreau last year that got, kind of had the injury, not the injury, sorry, penalties, but impacted by penalties, and sort of called some plays back and things like that. And so things could have been even better for him in 2024, but I think that they will be in 2025. We talk a lot about Juwan Johnson and the impact of Kellen Moore on Juwan Johnson as a receiving tight end. Foster Moreau is probably a little bit more of an all-around tight end. He can block for you in the run game and in the passing game. He can go out there and contribute for you as a receiver as well, runs nice routes, can make some tough catches for you over the middle of the field, all those other things. But the Saints are going to go into 2025 with a young quarterback. Whether it's Spencer Rattler or it's Tyler Shuck, it's going to be a young quarterback. And those tight ends are going to be very important, right? They're closer to the line of scrimmage, although they won't always operate close to the line of scrimmage in that Kellen Moore offense. But they will operate mostly close to the line of scrimmage. They'll have their opportunities to be able to help out those young quarterbacks. They'll get to be the safety valve here and there every now and then. And of course, you're now in a system that utilizes the tight end quite a bit, that tries to scheme those tight ends open, that uses sort of the crossing patterns to get them working laterally, all those other things. So Foster Moreau is going to be good for a couple of big plays every other week or every few weeks for sure. And so because of that, I think that he, as a guy right now that hasn't kind of been, I won't call him sight unseen, I won't call him out of sight, out of mind, because he has been around. To his credit, he's dealing with the injury. He would be in a situation to where, he's been recovering from that injury and rehabbing on the side, all those other things. But he's still there and present and working with the other tight ends and kind of helping to run some of the other drills and stuff like that, even though he's not actively participating. And so for Moreau going into this year, he has this opportunity ahead of him. He's just not on the field right now. And so I think when he gets back on the field during training camp, you'll start to see a little bit more conversation about him, a guy that's going to kind of have much bigger impact than maybe expected. And that impact can tick up when it comes to him getting more targets. Over the course of the past 4 seasons where he has been the most active as an NFL player, the 2023 season and the 2024 season are his 2 least targeted seasons. 43 targets last year, 25 targets the year before that, 54 targets in his final year with the Raiders, 44 targets in his penultimate season with the Raiders. And so the last 2 seasons have been his least targeted years. Now, some of that has to do with Taysom Hill. Some of that has to do with Juwan Johnson. Some of that has to do with the other tight ends at the position. But remember, he also overlapped with Darren Waller for a little bit too, right? So let's not pretend like he wasn't, able to be a focal point in an offense or let's say it this way. Let's not pretend like he wasn't able to be a consistent contributor in the offense when there was another focal point in the offense there, because there certainly was with Darren Waller at his same position. And he still had more targets, more opportunities than he has been given here so far in New Orleans over the course of the past couple of years. So I expect that will change. I think everybody knows the value of Foster Moreau at this point inside the building. Foster Moreau is somebody that if I'm you, I would not be afraid to bet on going into the 2025 NFL season. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, I want to tell you a little bit more about what stands out about Kellen Moore's offense and some of the noise that's going on around the New Orleans Saints defense from a pass rush perspective. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.